Hello and welcome to the third episode of this lockdown series. It's a weekly show posted every Thursday focusing on themes of photography, books and bookmaking and design. This episode is going to focus specifically on the process of research throughout one project of mine from the past. So I'll be talking through a project that ended up as a collaboration with 3 books being the outcome. Talk about using different research methods to hopefully strengthen the outcome in a more conceptual sense. Okay, we'll get straight into the work. So with any new project I start with a big folder. I'll usually lay out some sections divided with just tracing paper to show the different steps of research and to break the folder up so it is a bit more organised. So this brief was a one-word brief pretty much, and it was to create 3 books in reference to that word, which was variation. So a very broad start. To start, I always write some sort of initial idea. It could be just something I'm interested in at the time, or something I've been reading about, etc. I wanted to experiment with photography and its relations to variation over time. That was the main starting point, to just look at the photograph and how it directly links to time and try and explore that a bit deeper. Very broad starting point again. It was giving myself a lot of room to research and then point this in a certain direction. So first photographer I looked at was this work by Mclean. It's called 2 and 2. It's a series on his website. I'd really recommend it. It's a great body of work. He would shoot pairs of photographs of the same subject matter and the same kind of space, but at just different times. So you'd have two perspectives of this one kind of scene. There's always a point of reference in each pair where you can tell they're together, but what differentiates the 2 photographs can be a mix of either time or perspective. And going through this work, you begin to start analysing it yourself. There may be a certain shadow in one and not in the other, so you can tell. Perhaps a cloud's passed, it could be literally within a minute these photographs are apart. So yeah, I think this work it's a nice exploration of how photography plays with how it reinterprets space through the lens, and of giving the viewer room to kind of question ideas of perspective and time and scale. I liked that Mclean's work was this double perspective with 2 time frames, but I was thinking, what if I could use 2 cameras, take photos at the same time, so it would be reducing 2 perspectives into the same time. I always keep a notebook on me for a project, to just one that you don't need to be careful with, that you can literally just jot down anything that comes to mind. I'll refer to this as I talk through the project, just when it seems apparent. I needed either 2 cameras or just a mate to go and shoot with, which seemed easier and was a nice idea to turn this into a collaboration. One of the books of this final outcome was in collaboration with Elliot Kenzie. I'll link his stuff below. The first shoot was to go out with Elliot and try and capture the same piece of time/space at 2 different perspectives. So we went out shooting just next to each other, kind of saying like, okay, 3, 2, 1, shoot. After this day, I just printed off the pairs to kind of analyse them a little bit more, see which ones worked for what reasons and vice versa. So yeah, there was some where you could see, it wasn't the same frame, but it was the same space, and there was a linking. For instance, if you saw Elliot in my photo raising his hand, the next photo would be like a looking up. His perspective would be looking up. Again, just certain objects at varying perspectives. I liked these initially, but the problem with them was there was no real evidence to show that this was the same time. The subject matter were static. Like, it would be quite easy for one person to take these 2 photos and just pair them up. But then we found it was some tourists taking a photograph of the train station, and this one was a little bit more interesting. The top photograph, you can see this man raising his camera, and behind him you see this other man's blue cap. It was quite quick to take. They just noticed us taking it. There's this guy's blue cap in each frame that kind of connects these, but it was a passing moment. We both were just walking by and we quickly snapped them with flash. We knew we had to include some detail or point of reference that was clearly in a kind of fleeting moment to show these 2 perspectives being solidified in one time frame. I also did some other tests by myself, just revisiting old photographs at the same locations But this quickly was kind of let go of as an idea, just because it was too easy. It wasn't as interesting to me, just because again it was two perspectives over two time frames. Whereas the work with Elliot to me was a lot more interesting, and I think it spoke more about the idea of how cameras capture time and widening the scope of how a camera can capture a space in one time frame. So to sum up, we went through a week of doing some shoots, kind of reviewing what we had and then replanning to shoot. So me and Elliot shot the final pairs of photographs over about 2 days of shooting. So for this we separated the distance of our cameras further, and we were just on the phone to each other through earphones. We knew we'd be getting roughly the same time. So it was heavily focused on people, specifically people in movement, so you could tell these specific points of reference that again drew it back to the same time frame, and it had a kind of street feeling to it. Although I didn't like the visual language, I guess, of it, the actual look of the photos are just quite dark and gloomy, because Glasgow's light is just shit like 80% of the time. But that was alright, because this was more about the concept rather than just photos looking nice for the sake of it. So pairs like this worked very well. I was on a ramp to like a car park, shooting down where you can see this lady's foot just hitting the ground, and when you check Elliot's perspective you can see the matching foot just hitting as the same time was recorded. And again, subtle gestures like this man holding his glasses worked well. I think the fact that we hid from each other's cameras, I just think not showing us in either of the perspectives made this whole the effect of these pairs stronger. We weren't captured in any of the photos apart from the last pair, where just as this man's passing Elliot's camera, you see him fill his lens, but just beyond the man's head you can see me. Yeah, this photo just was one of the favourites because it was so bang on in terms of time. I cropped these photos both down, which were then used for the cover, and the back cover holding the title is my now, the same as your now, and the text again was inverted, so each side had this passing through. You could flip the book over to show the two times. So that was the main book done, but of course the brief was to produce 3 books with variation. So to fill the other 2, I knew I wanted to explore the same things but just dig a little deeper into the physics of this whole concept instead of just the subject matter of the photos. So I looked into quite a few theories and stuff like that, the biggest of which was Redshift. So it's a term in physics to, if an object in the sky is moving away at a certain rate, the wavelength of the light it produces is stretched. And if you look on any graph, the biggest wavelength of light in our visible spectrum is the colour red. So as objects are expanding away from our point of view, they stretch this wavelength and we perceive them with a red tint. It's believed to be a form of evidence for the Big Bang as well. So if you were to look into the sky and see red tinted things through a telescope or a photograph, they are moving away at a pace since the Big Bang, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, I took some photographs of the stars, long exposure photographs, and when inverted there was this hazy blue to them, suggesting that they did have this redshift attached and that I was taking photographs of objects in the universe that were still expanding away. Yeah, I hope I'm explaining this okay. I just thought it was very interesting for me to take my own photographs and see this theory show itself to me almost with just inverting certain images. But yeah, to sum up the last week of research, I wanted to make an equation based on the 3 variables of a camera that captures light itself. So the 3 variables are the shutter speed, the ISO and the aperture. Some of these link to time, but they all influence the way the camera records light. So in keeping with the stars redshift research, I shot 2 separate batches of the sky with 25 photos each. It was the exact same picture, but each time I took a new one, the ISO of the camera was changed to go up 1 level. I had these 2 sets of photographs at different times with 50 images total, all at varying exposures and varying ISO levels. So this gave me a lot of initial data to work with to formulate some equation that would determine the age of a photograph. And by age I don't mean how it would usually be. For instance, I took that photograph a year and a half ago. I mean the age of the physical photograph as it's being made. I know it sounds a bit confusing, but bear with me and I'll try to explain the equation. So because the aperture number gets lower as it lets in more light, it can be divided to make the output bigger. The overall equation, through some testing and failing at first, you take the shutter speed, you times it by the ISO, and you divide by the aperture number. So this means that you could input any data from a single photograph, and the age of the number, which I call the CT number, if you had a more exposed photograph, the number would be bigger. I wrote this equation out for each of the 50 photographs and compiled them in order, ranging from the darkest to the brightest, so the lowest number to the highest number, and that made up one of the books. So it was 50 of the same photograph. The third book was the handwritten equations to correlate to each page. I know that's quite a lot to take in. I probably didn't explain it that well, but yeah, that was the two final books. It was nice because I hadn't really researched and learned about physics in school, and it was always something I missed. So to kind of get these concepts and then explore them through photography and the camera, it was just a really interesting thing for me. So one of my favourites still to this day. So yeah, that was the 3 books of this project. I hope giving a bit of insight into how I reached the outcomes was interesting. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If this can be of use or help to anyone, then that's all I would want from this series, I suppose. So yeah, until next week, stay inside, stay safe, and I will see you soon.